at Shizuku's Reviews, bringing you a southern perspective on books, movies, music, and much, much more. Stick around for a while, you just might hear something wicked. Hello again, and welcome to episode 24 of Wicked Shizuku's Reviews. As this is a Thursday read, I'm just going to jump right back into Nomad Love. And tonight's segment is very short. 7. Takfine. Takfine repeated his name because Takfine was there in front of himself. In the image thrown back by the immense brass knocker, the door slid open on a long corridor leading to a patio. At the far end, seated in the shade of a colored tree, an old man dressed in white beard, white cane, amber rosary. Above on a branch, a little bird was silently rocking. "Come, I've been waiting for you. Takfine from the south. I know, it's written." "The tree you see here is an open book for those who know how to read. Come sit down. Here, drink while it's hot. I'd love to have picked you for some fresh figs, but it's given nothing but bitter oranges for almost a month now. No one's succeeded in taming it yet, those who've tried to hold its branches. Tell me, Moulay, about the tree. No, about me. Tell me what you've read." And that's the section this time for Nomad Love, which was very short indeed. So, we'll just go ahead and not really feeling up to Oedipus tonight. So I think I will skip right over to the Lowell offering about the Millhouse girls. Mill and boarding house, the new community. Thinly disguised reportage, letters from Susan, and tales of factory life illustrate the ways in which the boarding house served as a mediating structure in the transformation of farm girl into factory operative. Boarding on the corporation usually meant choosing a house where a friend or relative from home had paved the way. Thus began a socialization process which changed the homesick rustic, through pressure to conform, into the trim Lowell mill girl. The shawl pinned under the chin was abandoned for the scooter bonnet in the style. The unintelligible twang soon gave way through severe discipline and ridicule to the city way of speaking. More important still, the boarding house served as a point of entry for work in the mills. The new arrival would be presented to the overseer by the boarding house keeper or fellow boarder. Once in the mill, newcomers were assigned work as spare hands. In this apprentice capacity, they were paid a daily wage, independent of quantity, until they were skilled enough in the operation of 2 looms to receive wages based on the usual piecework. The new employees were assigned a more experienced partner for a few months, usually needed to master the skills of those jobs allotted to women: spinning, weaving, drawing in, the stretching and knotting of thousands of threads on the frame, and dressing a sizing process. when a regular hand in the anticipated turnover cycle. The spare hand was ready to take her place. In case of sickness, girls regularly covered the looms of the absent fellow worker so that she would not lose pay. Segregated from male workers by division of labor and removed from patriarchal family structure, the mill women had very little interaction with men in their daily lives, and indeed the male figures appearing in the offering seemed romantically remote heroes from the circulating library. Present reality, as reflected in these stories, was a woman's world of fellow workers and roommates. The pleasure of factory life are rendered brighter by what has been left behind, family tragedies or the horrors of domestic service, but every writer manages to convey the full shock of what that first day in the mill, the noise, fear, headache, and swollen feet, nor do the offering contributors gloss over boarding house discomforts, downstairs the noisy gobbled meals, and the aggressive intrusions of tradesmen, upstairs no place to hide. Despite a classically Victorian surprise ending, The Sister is a chilling illustration of the ugly face of peer pressure, an unhappy vindication of the Reverend Mr. Miles' assurance that moral policing began with the girls themselves, who normally ostracize any one of their number suspected of like conduct. Sisterly compassion towards such offenders and pleas to guard against calumny of the innocent are urged in a woman's voice to woman. Besides providing a spectrum of personalities, the grave and frivolous, the melancholy and the high-spirited leisure hours of the mill girls gives affecting evidence of the support, comfort, and love with which close-knit community of young women could sustain one another. Letters from Susan. Letter first, March. Day unknown, year unknown. Dear Mary, when I left home, I told you that I would write in a week and let you have my first impression of Lowell. I will keep my promise, though. If I should defer my letter a while longer, I think I could make it much more interesting. But you know I promised to be very minute, and there is always sufficient minutia to fill up a letter. I arrived here safe and sound, after being well jolted over the rocks and hills of New Hampshire, and when it was then evening, a gentleman in the stage first pointed out Lowell to me. With his lights twinkling through the gloom, I could think of nothing but Passamscot swamp, when brilliantly illuminated by lightning bugs. You, I know, will excuse all my up-country phrases, for I have not yet got the rust off, and to you and all my old-fashioned friends I shall always be rusty. My egotism I will not apologize for. It is what you request. To return to my adventures, for it all appears very romantic to me. The driver carried me to the corporation, as it is called, and which, so far as I now can describe it, is a number of short parallel streets with high brick blocks on either side. There are some blocks with blinds to them, and some are destitute. Some of the doors have bells, others have not. Contiguous to these boarding houses are the mills, of which I will tell you more by and by. I told the driver to carry me to N blank, and there he left me, where there was not a soul that I knew. If Cousin Sarah was gone, I inquired of an Irish girl who came to the door if Sarah G. Pollard boarded there. She said that she had gone to Manchester to work with an overseer who was an old acquaintance. The girl did not invite me in, and there I stood like a statter. As Aunt Hitty says, I did not feel disposed to make inquiries of the girl, so I was unaccustomed to her brogue. Just then, that is, just as my heart was sinking 10 fathoms below zero, a pleasant-looking woman came into the entry and, in a very motherly way, invited me into her own room, took off my things, ordered away my trunk and bandbox, brought camphor for my head, for it ached with my ride, and told me about Cousin Sarah. She said I had better not think of following her to Manchester, and promised to do all she could. This was Mrs. C., the boarding woman, a widow with several children, whom she keeps at school, and maintains well by her own industry and good management. I had expected coldness, or at least entire indifference, in this city, and the cordiality of the good landlady filled my heart with gratitude. I have since inquired if she were not unusually kind, but though she was a very good woman, the girls here say that she is not more so to me than any other new boarder, and that the boarding women are always dreadful good to a new boarder. Every girl, let her be ever so rusty, or rather rustic, fills one of the many niches prepared here for so many, and some, you know, are like nest eggs, and bring many more. But we will not be so uncharitable as to suppose there is nothing but policy in all of this, for there is surely something to excite a woman's sympathies in the sight, which is not uncommon here, of a lonely, friendless, helpless stranger. You can hardly think how my heart beat. I heard the bells ring for the girls to come to supper, and then the girls began to slam, and then Miss C. took me to the dining room, where there were 3 common-sized dining tables, and she seated me at one of them, and then the girls thickened around me until I was almost dizzy. At the table where I sat, they were very still, for the presence of a stranger is usually a damper upon them, but there was quite noise enough at the other tables, and what was wanted in wit was made up in merriment. After a while, 1 or 2 of my boon companions opened their mouths and spoke, and I have already found that those who make themselves most conspicuous in the presence of strangers, and would soonest attract their attention, are those who do themselves and those with whom they are connected the least credit. I remember that I must be very minute, so I will inform you that we had tea, flapjacks, and plum cake for supper. There was also bread, butter, and crackers upon the table, but I saw no one touch them. After supper, the tables were cleared in a trice. Some of the girls came in with their sewing, some went to their own rooms, and some went out upon the street. That is, they went to some meeting or evening school, or they were shopping, or visiting some other corporation, all of which is going upon the street in factory parlance. I retained my seat with the girls in the great keeping room, for Mrs. C. had company in her own sanctum, and I did not know where else to go. Some book peddlers, shoe peddlers, essence peddlers, and candy boys came in, and made very strenuous exertions to attract our attention. By most of the girls they were treated with cool civility, but there were some little noisy, self-conceited misses who detained them, under the presence of examining goods for purchase, but who were silly joking at the expense of the peddler, and collecting material for future merriment. Sometimes the joke was turned upon themselves, and it was seldom that both parties separated in good humor. At 10 o'clock, Mrs. C. came in and told us that it was time for us to all go to bed. Some begged for time to read this story out, others just for a few minutes to finish this scene. She refused them good-naturedly, but those were the most cunning who wanted to warm their feet, and detained by her telling queer stories of what they had seen and heard upon the street, and she unconsciously gave them a few minutes she had first refused. I was shown up 3 flights of stairs into what is called the long attic. They were where they put all poor stranger girls, the most objectionable places being always left for newcomers. There were 3 beds in it, only 2 of which were occupied, for this is always the room for vacancies. My baggage had already been carried up by the boys, as the boarders called Mrs. C.'s sons, and I looked woefully at the strange girl who was to be my chum. She took no notice of me and went to sleep as composedly as if I had been still among the White Mountains. But the 2 girls in the further bed kept whispering together something about the old man. I was very nervous and almost wished the old boy had them both. But when the house was still, a strange fear came over me, such as created in children by telling them about the old man. I heard the bells strike in midnight hour long before I went to sleep, and then I dreamed about the old man. As soon as day broke, I was awakened by one of the girls jumping out of bed and beginning to crow. That awakened the others, and they bestirred themselves. One sung, "Morning bells I hate to hear, ringing dolefully loud and drear." Then the others struck up with a loud voice, "Now isn't it a pity such a pretty girl as I should be sent to the factory to pine away and die?" I dressed myself and followed them downstairs, where I found my place at the table, and our early breakfast was all ready for us. It consisted of hot cakes and coffee. There was also hash upon the table for those who wanted it. When the girls had gone to work, I asked Mrs. C. what I should do. She replied that she would go herself and see if I could have a place, for she was well acquainted with many of the overseers and thought she could get me in. She went in for me, but no overseer would take me, even upon her recommendation, until they had seen me themselves. One promised, however, to give me work if she liked the looks of me, and she considers this place as if already engaged, for she says she knows he will like me when he sees me. You may ask how Mrs. C. would recommend me. She was so well acquainted with Cousin Sarah that she had often heard her speak of me, and she says that she never deceived either in her estimate of a good, honest country girl. The overseer said he should not want me until next week, and I felt rather unpleasant at the thought of paying my board while earning nothing. But Mrs. C. said she had quilts to make, and if I would assist her a little, she would give me my board, so I can run round and see all the lions and lionesses and get quite an idea of my location before I go into the mill. Oh, how I dread to be cooped up there day after day. You will ask what I have already seen. I have been out upon a long street called Central Street, and another long street at right angles with it called Merrimack Street. There are stores with beautiful goods upon either side and some handsome public buildings. There is a great hotel called the Merrimack House, which is much larger than any I ever saw before, and near it is the railroad depot. I waited one day to see the cars come in from Boston. They moved, as you know, very swiftly, but not so much like a streak of lightning as I had anticipated. If all country girls are like me, their first impressions of a city are far below their previous conceptions, and I think there is more difference than there really is. Little as I know of it now that I see, the difference is more apparent than real. There are the same passions at work beneath the surface. When I went out with Mrs. C., she made me put on one of her girls' bonnets, because mine did not turn up behind and out at the ears, and she said it was O.S. instead of O.K. Well, as I walked along and saw all the beautifully dressed ladies, I thought within myself, that with bonnets and dresses of an old style, they too would not be passable. You must know that they dress very much here. At least it so appears to us, who have just come off of the hills and been accustomed to put on our woolen gowns in the morning and our better woolen gowns in the afternoon. Here they wear velvets and furs and plumes and bugles and all. I should wish to know a great deal to be dressed so, for I should think there was a great deal of it to be expected of one who made such pretensions. I told Mrs. C. that the city ladies were not so pale as I expected. She said that many of them were painted, and that rouge was becoming more fashionable every year. She says that even some of the factory girls use it, and pointed out several highly dressed girls whose cheeks were truly a carmine tint. I have attended meetings the only Sabbath I have been here. It seems as though everyone went to meeting. The streets are so full on Sundays, but it is not so. Yet Lowell is a church-going place, and they say that they have good meetings and ministers. I went to the congregational meeting for that. You know, is the one I have always been accustomed to attend. The meeting house is one of the oldest in the city, and not beautiful, though a good, respectable-looking building. The congregation was very tastefully dressed, I thought, as I looked at some of the ladies. That old Parson Trevor would preach to them from Matthew 26:18, top not come down. In the afternoon, I went to the Methodist meeting. This, you are aware, is, with us, the ragged meeting. But here, my paper is full, and I can only say ribbons, bows, plumes, ruffles, fringes, wimples and crimples, ruffs and puffs and farthingales. Yet the preaching was of a higher order than I had anticipated. Next Sunday, I shall go see the Episcopalians and Catholics, of whom we have always heard so little that is good. Yet there was a strange and not unhallowed sensation excited in my breast when I first saw a church with a spire surmounted by a cross, that symbol of our holy religion, and the dark stone church which was first built here, revived by the impressions which were created by our juvenile literature, which, you know, a few years since was wholly English. Yours affectionately, Susan. Edited by Harriet Farley, Volume 4, 1844. Pages 145 through 148. And next time, we shall hear from Susan again in her second letter. But for now, I am going to take a short break, and I will be right back. So, see you on the other side. And welcome back. Thanks for sticking around for so long. So, we shall be jumping right back into our the Gnostic Bible. And I will be reading the introduction of the Gospel of Thomas and the first 15 sayings. The Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is a wisdom gospel, like the sayings gospel Q. Which most scholars now suggest was a source used in compiling the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. The Gospel of Thomas portrays Jesus as one who disseminates life-giving wisdom through his sayings. Unlike the New Testament Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and other non-canonical Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas contains almost no narrative. Jesus in Thomas performs no physical miracles, reveals no fulfillment of prophecy, announces no apocalyptic kingdom about to disrupt the world order, dies for no one's sins, and does not rise from the dead on Easter Sunday. His value, rather, lies in his enigmatic sayings, which are pregnant with possibility and power. Whoever discovers what these sayings mean will not taste death, Jesus promises. That is to say, one who uncovers the interpretive keys to the meaning of these sayings thinks Jesus' thoughts after him and completes his sayings in new, sagacious ways. Such a one seeks and finds true wisdom and knowledge. The editor of the Gospel is said to be Judas Thomas, or Judas the Twin, who is acclaimed by Syrian Christians as the twin brother of Jesus and the messenger or apostle to the Syrians. A version of this Gospel may have been composed, most likely in Greek, as early as the middle of the 1st century, or somewhat later. A few scholars have suggested that the Gospel of Thomas may have been composed in Syriac. But that proposal has not proved to be convincing. The gospel may have been written in Syria, possibly at Edessa, modern Urfa, where the memory of Thomas was revered and where his bones were venerated. Many of the sayings in the Gospel of Thomas recall sayings of Jesus in the New Testament Gospels, but many are previously unknown sayings or versions of sayings of Jesus. Some sayings may well derive ultimately from the historical Jesus. The Gospel of Thomas has attracted a great deal of popular interest and was portrayed as a significant and suppressed collection of sayings of Jesus in the film Stigmata. The numbering of the sayings employed here, 1 through 114, is a scholarly convention. The translation gives the Semitic forms of Semitic names in order to highlight the Jewish identity of Jesus and his students and the Jewish context of the life of historical Jesus. For example, the name Yeshua is used for Jesus, and other names are identified in the notes. The Gospel of Thomas, footnote. The Gospel of Thomas, Nag Hammadi, Library Codex 2, and the Greek fragments of the Oxyrhynchus Papyrus 1, 654 and 655, translated from the Coptic by Marvin, Meyer. There are many parallels in the New Testament Gospels to the sayings of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. The New Testament parallels are not listed in the notes for reasons of economy of space, but the serious seeker will easily find them. These are hidden sayings that the living Yeshua spoke, and Yehuda Toma, the twin, recorded. Footnote. Instead of hidden sayings, we may translate as secret sayings or obscure sayings. The Book of Thomas has a similar opening, and the secret book of James also called itself a secret book. Yeshua is Jesus here and throughout, and Yehuda Toma is Judas Thomas. The living Yeshua is almost certainly not a reference to the resurrected Jesus as traditionally understood, but rather to Jesus who lives through his sayings. 1. And he said, footnote, the speaker is probably Jesus, otherwise Judas Thomas, with an editorial remark. And he said, whoever discovers what these sayings mean will not taste death. Footnote, or the interpretation of these sayings. Coptic, hermenia, from Greek. And he said, whoever discovers these sayings mean will not taste death. 2. Yeshua said, seek and do not stop seeking until you find. When you find, you will be troubled. When you are troubled, you will marvel and rule over all. 3. Yeshua said, if your leaders tell you, look, the kingdom is in heaven, then the birds of heaven will precede you. If they say to you, it's in the sea, then the fish will precede you. But the kingdom is inside you and it is outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, then you will dwell in poverty, and you are poverty. 4. Yeshua said, a person in old days will not hesitate to ask a little child 7 days old about the place of life, and the person will live, for many of the first will be the last. and become a single one. 5. Yeshua said, know what is in front of your face, and what is hidden from you will be disclosed. There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. 6. His students asked him and said to him, do you want us to fast? How should we pray? Should we give to charity? What diet should we observe? Yeshua said, do not lie and do not do what you hate. All things are disclosed before heaven. There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed, nothing covered that will remain undisclosed. Yeshua said, blessings on the lion if a human eats it, making the lion human. Foul is the human if a lion eat it, making the lion human. 8. And he said, humankind is like a wise fisherman who cast his net into the sea, and drew it up from the sea full of little fish. Among the fish he found a fine large fish. He threw all the little fish back into the sea, and easily chose the large fish. Whoever has ears to hear should hear. Yeshua said, look, the sower... Let me back up. Hold on. Number 9. Yeshua said, look, the sower went out, took a handful of seeds, and scattered them. Some fell on the road, and the birds came and picked them up. Others fell on rock, and they did not take root in the soil, and did not produce heads of grain. Others fell on thorns, and they choked the seeds, and worms devoured them. And others fell on good soil, and it brought forth a good crop, yielding 60 per measure, and 120 per measure. 10. Yeshua said, I have thrown fire upon the world, and look, I am watching till it blazes. 11. Yeshua said, this heaven will pass away, and the one above it will always. Let me back up again. 11. Yeshua said, this heaven will pass away, and the one above it will pass away. The dead are not alive, and the living will not die. During the days when you ate what is dead, you made it alive. When you are in the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became two. But when you become two, what will you do? 12. The students said to Yeshua, we know you will leave us. Who will be our leader? Yeshua said to them, wherever you are, seek out Yaakov, the just. For his sake, heaven and earth came into being. Footnote. Yaakov the just, or the righteous, is James the just, the brother of Jesus and the leader of the church in Jerusalem until his death in 62 CE. He was given his nickname because of his reputation for piety and Torah observance. On James the just in Jerusalem, see the conclusion of the secret book of James. 13. Yeshua said to his students, compare me to something and tell me what I am like. Shimon Kepha said to him, footnote, Simon Peter, you are like a just messenger. Mattai said to him, Matthew, you are like a wise philosopher. Thomas, said to him, Rabbi, or teacher, my mouth is utterly unable to say what you are like. Yeshua said, I am not your rabbi, because you have drunk, you are intoxicated from the bubbling spring I tended. Footnote: Jesus is the enlightened bartender who serves up wisdom. In general, this saying resembles saying 108, which we will get to much later. And he took them and withdrew and spoke 3 sayings. Footnote, and I'll backtrack just a little bit. And spoke 3 sayings, or 3 words. Coptic, inshalment, inshalji. These 3 sayings, or 3 words, are not reported. The reader must discover the interpretation on 3 such words. See also Kaulaku, Koa, Salas, Sal, Zisar in the Nicene sermon. And he took him and withdrew and spoke 3 sayings to him. When Thomas came back to his friends, they asked him, "What did Yeshua say to you?" Thomas said to them, "If I tell you one of the sayings he spoke to me, you will pick up rocks and stone me, and fire will come out of the rocks and consume you." (14) Yeshua said to them, "If you fast, you will bring sin upon yourselves, and if you pray, you will be condemned, and if you give to charity, you will harm your spirits. When you go into any region and walk through the countryside, and people receive you, eat what they serve you, and heal the sick among them. What goes into your mouth will not defile you, but what comes out of your mouth will defile you." 15. Yeshua said, "When you see one not born of woman, fall on your faces and worship. That is your Father." And this is our stopping point for this particular episode. I hope you enjoyed episode 24 and our Thursday reads. So, we shall see you next time. Thanks for listening.